Sir, we had the correct number of assets in Benghazi at the time of 9/11 for what had been agreed upon.
Okay, my time has expired. To start off by saying you had the correct number and our ambassador and 3 other individuals are dead and people are in the hospital recovering because it only took moments to breach that facility somehow doesn't seem to ring true to the American people.
Charlene Lamb, who was with the State Department, could be headed to Canada. Why does that matter? Well, she was part of the lie that was Benghazi, the debacle that was the Benghazi terrorist attack of September 11th, 2011. Now a story on sofrep.com. That's a website that deals with military issues related to the Special Forces. Says Department of State Charlene Lamb cited for leadership failure, assigned to RSO. That's Regional Security Officer, if I'm not mistaken. The article goes on to quote from the Senate report that specifically said, yet when the Libyan mission transmitted its official request for additional security personnel on March 28, 2012, the pushback from Ms. Lamb's office was swift and significant. That failure now headed to Canada. Brandon Webb is the president and editor-in-chief at sofrep.com, joins us from San Diego. Brandon, this is a story that you initially called this a promotion. State Department said, oh, no, it's not a promotion. Either way, it looks like she's coming to Canada in a position at the U.S. Embassy that will involve security, so essentially border security issues. That leaves me worried as a Canadian.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, let me say it's great to be on in Canada, my home country. I appreciate you guys having me on. But yeah, the problem is, I mean, you've seen the clip from Ms. Lamb testifying before Congress. I mean, she looks like a deer in the headlights. And this is a lady that was cited for gross negligence in the State Department's follow-up investigation. And now she's still in a very influential position as regional security officer, which is really, from what our State Department sources tell us, a reward for her kind of cooperating with this, internal cover-up within the State Department. I mean, the State Department under the Undersecretary of State, Patrick Kennedy, who's the Undersecretary of Management, really had some leadership issues, and that's what we've been really drilling down on and saying, look, how can you have Patrick Kennedy, who was essentially running the State Department under former Secretary Clinton, just have these gross errors and negligence all over the place and we're not holding him accountable, we're not holding Charlene Lamb accountable, and just what kind of example does this set when your negligence contributes to the death of one U.S. ambassador, 2 Navy SEALs, one who was a best friend of mine and a godfather to my kids, and be rewarded for it? Like, what kind of examples does that set?
Now, I know some people have snickered and said, oh, really, a reward going to Canada? But the diplomatic positions in Ottawa, you don't get those. Those don't go to career diplomats, the ambassador's job. Neither do the jobs under the ambassador. You have to be a top-level donor to President Obama or whoever's in the White House to get that job. So I mean, Ottawa's a nice town, but let's put in perspective what she's going to be in charge of. She's a regional security officer. Part of what she'll be dealing with is border security issues. This is the longest undefended border in the world, 8,891 kilometers, 119 border crossings, $1.9 billion worth of daily trade back and forth, and 300,000 people crossing every day. There's a lot at stake there that she could bungle once again, and she doesn't have a good track record.
Yeah, I mean, she has a track record that should have her nowhere near any level of this kind of responsibility. And, like you said, it's a very large border, and there's a lot of serious issues at play here. I don't think people should dismiss it as, oh, it's Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north. I mean, there's a lot of important issues involving border security across, the Canadian-American border, and it shouldn't be taken. It should be taken seriously. And the last place Ms. Lamb should be is anywhere near any type of job that has anything to do with security. I personally wouldn't have her watching the door at a nightclub downtown San Diego, let alone, being trained as a regional security officer.
Let's get to another clip of Charlene Lamb. I believe she's once again being questioned by Representative Darrell Issa in this. and saying, look, they didn't really request anything. It was just, you know, a request is not a request, is essentially what she's saying. Roll tape.
Now, yesterday you told us, under penalty of perjury, essentially, that it wasn't a request, it was a recommendation. Does the word request mean request? And are you prepared to say today that they requested these assets above and beyond what they had on September 11th?
Sir, we discussed that there was no justification that normally comes with a request.
There is no justification. So let's leave aside where she's going for a minute and focus on her failure. This is a woman whose office, according to the Senate's own report, pushed back against the idea that the consulate in Benghazi needed more security. Now, Brendan, you lost a good friend in Glenn Doherty. 3 other Americans died along with him, including Ambassador Stevens. That obviously is a failure, and she's trying to say, well, they didn't follow the right protocol. Isn't that the worst kind of bureaucratic mumbo jumbo you've ever heard? Yeah,
it's terrible. And you talk about allocating the right amount of resources in that last statement she made. The State Department has an internal annual vulnerability assessment called the SETL. It's a Security Environment Threat List, and it lists all of the 200+ State Department facilities worldwide and ranks them in 4 categories: low, medium, high, or critical threat. And Benghazi and Tripoli, the facilities there, were ranked as critical threat facilities, which by their own report should allocate the maximum amount of security personnel and financial resources to those, high and critical threat areas. So they knew that situation in Libya was not a very dangerous place. And in 1998, we had the coordinated U.S. embassy bombings in Africa, and again, a U.S. Ambassador had requested security. And again, this Patrick Kennedy, who's now the Undersecretary of Management, was explaining away the fact that they didn't have the security in Africa because this report that I just mentioned, the SETL, didn't rank the African countries as higher critical threat. Well, now you have, over a decade later, the same situation in Libya. That report does list them as a critical threat area, and still they're not getting the support they need. And the people in Libya with the State Department were screaming, like begging for increased security. And we're talking 5 additional bodies is what they requested, and Lamb's office refused. And so to me, it's, people make mistakes. I've made plenty myself. But what my military service has taught me is that you lead by example, you hold yourself accountable, you hold your people accountable. And if you don't do that and learn from your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat history. And this is a situation where there's a lot of angry Americans that are unhappy that we aren't holding these bureaucrats responsible within the State Department. And what kind of precedent does that set going forward? And people are upset, and I'm definitely one of them.
And rightly so. The White House may call this a phony scandal, but I know you don't, and we don't, and we'll stick on it. Brendan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.